You ever see a news headline that just makes you kind of stop and go, hang on, did I read that right?
Definitely. And we had one like that recently, didn't we? Regarding a major national holiday.
Exactly. It caused a few double takes for sure.
It's a proposal that really gets you thinking about, well, how we remember things, our history, what national symbols really mean to us.
Right. So today, we're doing a deep dive into this proposal from former President Trump. The idea is to rename Veterans Day to Victory Day for World War I,
Uh-huh.
and then establish May 8th as a separate Victory Day for World War II.
Okay.
Now, we know you, our listener, often want to get a good handle on these kinds of things, see the different angles, but without getting totally swamped in information.
Yeah, cut through the noise a bit.
That's exactly what we're aiming for here. We'll be looking at some key excerpts that outline this proposal and its potential implications.
Trying to get a clear picture of what's being suggested and, what the ripple effects might be.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack it, to look at the history behind it, the language being used, the potential impact, and sort of the bigger picture questions about how we as a nation commemorate things.
Makes sense. Where should we start?
Okay, let's dive in. And I think the natural place to begin is with the holiday itself, Veterans Day, its history.
Absolutely. Veterans Day has quite a story. It didn't start out as Veterans Day.
Right, it was Armistice Day first.
Exactly. Armistice Day, November 11th, 1918, marking the end of World War I, the moment the guns fell silent.
So initially, very much focused on that specific conflict, the Great War.
That was the original focus, yes, remembering the sacrifices in World War I. But over time, that changed.
How so?
Well, it evolved into a day to honor all U.S. veterans from all conflicts, all branches of service.
Okay, so it became more encompassing.
Much more. It reflected this growing feeling that we needed to recognize everyone who'd served, worn the uniform, regardless of when or where.
So for a really long time now, was it 87 years? November 11th hasn't just been about WWI.
Not for decades, no. It's become this moment for the whole country to pause and reflect on the service, the sacrifice of all veterans.
And crucially, it's not primarily about celebrating a win, is it? It's more reflective.
That's a really key distinction. Its established role for a long, long time now is about reflection, acknowledging the cost of freedom, the personal sacrifices, honoring commitment, often in really difficult circumstances.
Which brings us back to the proposal to rename it. That feels like it could fundamentally shift that focus.
It really could. By putting victory right there in the name, there's a definite risk, maybe an unintended one, but still a risk, of pushing that broader story of service, of individual sacrifice across all of history into the background.
Okay, so that's the context for Veterans Day as it stands. Now, let's look more closely at Trump's actual proposal. It feels like more than just swapping names.
Oh, absolutely. Suggesting Victory Day for World War I for November 11th and adding a new Victory Day for World War II on May 8th, that's clearly aiming to do more than just tweak the calendar.
It's about the narrative.
It's a deliberate effort to reshape how we understand our national story, our past.
And the language he used, it's pretty striking, isn't it? Phrases like Victory Day for World War I, Victory Day for World War II, and then just flat out, we won both wars.
Very direct, very assertive, almost celebratory in tone.
Yeah. And he ties it directly to a critique of today's leaders, too, doesn't he? Saying something like, we never celebrate anything? That's because we don't have leaders anymore that know how to do so.
Exactly. That adds another whole layer. It's not just, let's remember these wins. It's also implying, well, a failing in current leadership.
A sense that maybe they aren't willing or able to celebrate American achievements in that same way.
Precisely. The call for an unapologetic celebration of military victories signals a desire to perhaps redefine national identity around these moments of triumph.
Which would be a pretty fundamental change for a federal observance that's had this broader, more inclusive purpose for so long.
The huge change, yes.
Okay, let's hone in on that word, victory. It's powerful, obviously, but it can mean different things, or at least carry different weights, right?
It really can. The rhetoric of victory, it's potent stuff. On one hand, yeah, it evokes pride, strength, national accomplishment, big moments where the nation overcame huge challenges.
Things that can build national confidence.
Sure. But here's the other side of it. Focusing just on victory risks, obscuring the immense human cost of war. Victory almost always comes with tremendous loss and suffering.
That's critical. You can't really separate the win from the sacrifice needed to achieve it.
And that's a major concern here. If the focus shifts solely to the triumphant outcome, you risk minimizing the sorrow, the hardship, the long-term consequences. It could disrupt that balance Veterans Day has held between, celebration and solemn remembrance.
And that line about needing to start celebrating our victories again,
Yeah.
it implies we haven't been, or we've somehow lost the knack for it.
That's a really interesting part of the interpretation, isn't it? It taps into this feeling some might have that the nation's lost its way, lost a clear sense of purpose or the ability to achieve those unambiguous wins.
Kind of a nostalgia for a simpler time, maybe?
Possibly. There's an appeal to a simpler view of the past where maybe victory felt more straightforward. But, as you know,
History's rarely simple.
not at all. National memory is incredibly complex. Focusing only on victory can easily gloss over strategic sacrifices, ethical dilemmas, the enduring human cost, all the nuances that really shape our understanding.
Which naturally leads us to think about the veterans themselves. I mean, Veterans Day is for them. How might this kind of change land within veteran communities?
That's a crucial question. For so many veterans and their families, Veterans Day is, well, it's sacred. It's deeply personal. It's the day the nation says thank you for their service, their sacrifice, and that includes acknowledging loss, not just bravery.
So it connects very directly to individual experiences, memories.
Exactly. And the worry is, if you rebrand the day around victory, does that somehow reduce those deeply personal sacrifices to just symbols of national achievement? Does it overlook the individual stories of hardship, resilience, trauma even?
That makes sense. And veterans haven't all served in the same conflicts. There's WWA, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, so many different contexts.
Right. And many veterans see their service as part of a continuum, a shared bond that transcends specific wars or political eras. They honor everyone who served.
So emphasizing specific victories could feel exclusionary.
It could risk alienating those whose service wasn't in one of those named victory wars, or who feel their own experiences are being overshadowed or maybe even implicitly devalued. It could potentially create divisions.
Within the veteran community itself.
That's a real concern. While a more celebratory tone might appeal to some, politicizing commemoration like this could undermine the personal, local, even therapeutic aspects of the current Veterans Day for many. It's not just about a historical win, it's about acknowledging the lasting impact of service.
Okay, so this is clearly more than just semantics. It could really change the whole meaning of the day.
Yeah.
And these kinds of proposals, touching national symbols, they often stir things up, don't they? What about the wider political, social ripples? Could this unite people, or is it more likely to divide?
History suggests that proposals altering core symbols often do spark significant debate, and yeah, they can impact national unity. This one feels like it has the potential to be quite divisive.
You mentioned how it might appeal to some.
Right. For some conservative audiences, this could feel like a welcome call to celebrate American strength, American leadership. It taps into a sense of pride, maybe a desire to return to a perceived era of clearer, more decisive victories. Unambiguous strength.
A kind of Make America Great Again theme applied to remembrance.
You could certainly see it connecting to that sentiment, but on the flip side, critics are likely to view this as, well, historical revisionism, reinterpreting the past for a present political purpose.
Worrying that the focus on victory drowns out reflection, empathy.
Exactly. And that it could alienate communities, maybe Indigenous veterans, families with different historical perspectives on these conflicts. They might feel their experiences aren't reflected in a purely victory narrative.
So it risks deepening partisan divides, making remembrance itself another political battleground.
That's a potential danger. Instead of being a unifying moment, it could exacerbate polarization. It might frame national pride in a way that feels exclusionary to some.
And the real-world consequences.
Could include energizing certain political bases, sure, but also raising really fundamental questions about deviating from traditions that have, generally held broad support across the political spectrum.
Practically speaking, though, how does something like this even happen? Can a former president just declare a holiday change?
Good question. No. While the announcement came via social media, the actual power to designate federal holidays lies squarely with Congress.
Congress has to legislate it.
Correct. Veterans Day has a long-standing legal basis, and honestly, it enjoys huge bipartisan support as a day honoring all service members. Any change would need an act of Congress.
So it's not a simple executive decision. A whole political process is involved.
Absolutely. And proposing a new federal holiday on May 8th, plus potentially renaming Veterans Day, that's a heavy legislative lift. Given the current support for Veterans Day as it is, the odds of Congress enacting such sweeping changes seem, well, uncertain. Let's put it that way.
And even if it gained steam, wouldn't there be questions about how these 2 days would work? One for WWI victory, one for WWII victory. What about everyone else?
Big questions. Would it create a confusing split in remembrance, or could they somehow merge celebrations? How would that even work? Plus, the sheer logistics.
Changing the federal calendar.
Huge undertaking. It
Yeah.
affects government, businesses, schools, local events. Everything needs realignment. There'd be debates over funding, public perception, historical interpretation. It's complex.
Thinking even bigger picture, how does this compare globally? Do other countries focus just on victory, or is it usually more mixed?
It's a really interesting comparison. Many nations wrestle with this. Look at Europe, Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, also May 8th. That often does mix celebration of the war's end with solemn reflection on the horrific cost.
So there are precedents for marking specific victories.
There are, but the American context is unique, shaped by our own history and values. There's perhaps a risk that if we shift too heavily towards celebrating conquest, it might overshadow the personal and societal sacrifice narratives that are really core to the American story.
And could that have international implications? How might other countries see it?
Potentially. If the U.S. seems to be embracing a very strong, perhaps nationalistic victory-only narrative, some international audiences might see it as, well, revisionist or overly focused on military might. That could have subtle impacts on diplomacy, where shared historical understanding often plays a background role.
We've touched on this idea of victory versus sacrifice a few times. Can we just unpack that tension a bit more? Why is that balance so critical?
Sure, military victories are undeniably potent symbols. They inspire pride, awe even. But if you look at American history, those moments of triumph are almost always deeply intertwined with immense sacrifice, both individual and collective.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And renaming Veterans Day to focus only on victory risks flattening that complex reality. It's like only talking about the summit without acknowledging the incredibly hard climb and those lost along the way.
Just focusing on the outcome, not the process or the cost.
Precisely. You risk downplaying the personal losses, the long-term trauma, the ongoing needs of veterans and their families, which continue long after the parade's end.
So overemphasizing the win could actually distract from the crucial work of healing, reconciliation, and ongoing support.
That's the concern. A truly full remembrance needs to hold both the achievement and the profound human cost. It needs the whole picture.
This whole thing feels like it taps into fundamental questions about how we remember. Have there been similar big shifts or debates about commemoration in the past?
Oh, definitely. History shows national commemorations do get reinterpreted or reshaped sometimes, often reflecting the politics of the moment. But the core ideas behind them, especially ones as deeply rooted as Veterans Day, tend to be pretty resilient.
Why Veterans Day in particular?
Well, it's generally served as a unifying day, honoring service across all conflicts, inviting reflection. It hasn't typically been a point of major partisan contention.
So a radical rebranding like this would be pretty unusual.
Very unusual. There isn't much precedent for such a sweeping change to a foundational holiday, especially one held in such high regard. Trying to fundamentally shift its meaning risks marginalizing the solemn parts, and yeah, it could easily be seen as trying to rewrite history for a specific agenda.
Finding that balance between celebrating strength and honoring the complexity of conflict, it's delicate.
Extremely delicate.
And this connects back to that leadership point Trump made, doesn't it? The critique about current leaders not celebrating victories.
It absolutely does. That assertion taps into a vein of nostalgia, perhaps, for a time perceived as having stronger, more decisive leadership, where victories felt less complicated or were celebrated more overtly.
It frames celebrating past wins as a litmus test for strong leadership today.
Essentially, yes. It suggests the nation has somehow lost touch with its own glory because we don't have the right kind of celebratory frameworks or leaders who champion them.
But that view might clash with more modern ideas of leadership, right? Ideas valuing complexity, inclusivity.
For sure. Many people today see strong leadership as involving nuance, empathy, learning from the whole of history's successes and failures. Framing remembrance solely around victory could alienate those who value that more multifaceted approach.
It really boils down to that core tension. Can you celebrate triumph without erasing its cost?
That's the fundamental question this proposal forces us to confront. Can an unapologetic focus on the win coexist with a respectful, honest acknowledgement of the sacrifice and the long shadow conflict casts?
A proposal like this is guaranteed to light up the media, social media, everywhere. What kind of narratives or spin are we likely to see?
Oh, you can bet it'll be a major topic. Supporters will likely frame it as reclaiming American greatness, a necessary step to restore national pride and recognize military achievement properly. A narrative of strength and purpose.
Celebrating victories unapologetically.
Right. On the other side, detractors will probably call it a revisionist project, stripping nuance, maybe even disrespecting the diverse experiences of veterans. They'll emphasize the importance of solemn remembrance and unity.
So a battle of narratives.
Definitely. Expect lots of news analysis, interviews with veterans offering different perspectives, panel debates, all wrestling with patriotism, memory, and what it means to honor service.
And the central question in all that media coverage.
Probably boils down to, will focusing on victory empower the nation, bring people together, or will it ultimately divide us further?
Moving beyond the symbolic, federal holidays have real-world practical impacts too, don't they? Economic, social.
Absolutely. They have tangible economic effects. Think travel, retail, days off work, government closures. Approving a new federal holiday on May 8th or significantly changing Veterans Day would require major adjustments to calendars in both the public and private sectors.
That's a big logistical hurdle.
It is. And socially, these days are important community touchstones. They shape how we gather, how schools teach history, what cultural programs get highlighted. Altering them raises questions about continuity versus innovation in how we mark shared history.
How do you maintain tradition while reflecting current values?
Tricky. Very tricky.
Given everything we've discussed, the history, the potential impact on veterans, the political divisiveness, it seems safe to assume there'd be significant pushback against this. Who would likely lead that opposition?
You'd likely see strong opposition from several quarters. Established veteran organizations, many of which have worked for decades to protect the current meaning of Veterans Day, would almost certainly vote of concerns.
Makes sense. Who else?
Historians, emphasizing the need for nuance and accuracy, would likely weigh in. Also, political leaders across the spectrum who might see it as unnecessarily divisive or politically motivated, rather than a genuine effort to improve how we remember.
And their core argument would probably be
That prioritizing victory over remembrance risks undermining the very purpose of the day. That true national unity comes from acknowledging the full spectrum of service. The triumphs, yes, but also the hardships, the losses, the ongoing needs.
So is there a constructive path forward? Can elements of victory be incorporated without losing the core meaning?
It's possible, but it would require careful, inclusive dialogue. Respecting the traditions of Veterans Day would have to be paramount. Maybe there are ways to explore incorporating celebrations of specific milestones, but it would need broad buy-in and cooperation, likely across political divides, to avoid making things more polarized.
This whole conversation really makes you think about the bigger picture, the future of national commemoration itself.
Yeah.
It feels like a constant negotiation, doesn't it, between celebration and remembrance?
It really is. As society changes, how we choose to remember our past evolves too. This debate highlights that ongoing tension, the pull towards celebratory patriotism versus the need for solemn, reflective remembrance.
Could we see new practices emerge? Maybe ways to do both?
Perhaps. Maybe future commemorations find ways to integrate both more explicitly. Dual events, innovative ways to weave celebration into the existing Veterans Day framework without losing its core focus on gratitude and sacrifice. It's hard to say.
But it reminds us that these holidays aren't just fixed dates on a calendar.
Not at all. They're dynamic rituals carrying immense symbolic weight. Their meanings are constantly being negotiated.
And maybe this debate, difficult as it is, could actually lead to a richer discussion about how we remember.
That's the optimistic view, isn't it? That grappling with these questions could ultimately lead to a more thoughtful, inclusive framework for public remembrance, one that acknowledges both the glory and the grief in our national story.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. At its heart, former President Trump's proposal is about shifting the national focus in how we remember key historical moments, specifically WWI and WWII.
Right. Moving towards a narrative centered on victory and implicitly on a certain kind of strong leadership associated with those victories.
It aims to recalibrate what we emphasize when we look back.
Exactly. Prioritizing the win.
And this, as we've discussed, raises some pretty profound questions for you, our listener, to mull over. What is the right balance between celebrating national achievements and solemnly honoring the immense sacrifices made?
Can a nation truly embrace its victories without fully reckoning with the losses, the costs, the long-term consequences?
And ultimately, what does the way we choose to remember, what we highlight, what we perhaps downplay say about us right now? About our values, our leadership, our sense of national identity?
These aren't easy questions with simple answers. They'll continue to be debated and shaped by all sorts of perspectives across the country.
So as you think about this deep dive, we leave you with this final thought. Consider that delicate balance between victory and sacrifice in our collective memory. How should a nation best remember its past? And what message does that send about its present and its future?
Yeah, it's worth thinking about the wider ripples too, how memory shapes politics, how media frames identity, the economics of holidays, how different generations see things, what we expect from leadership. It's all connected.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.